This is the story of a girl who found comfort in the silence of an old man, until one day, that silence became permanent. Backhand index pointing right if you believe kindness still matters in this world. Like this video and subscribe to Outfit Stories, because sometimes, the quietest people leave the loudest impact. Amara was the kind of girl who walked through life quietly, unnoticed by most, forgotten by many. At just 19, life had already shown her its cold side. After losing her parents in a tragic accident when she was only 12, she was passed around between relatives until her aunt reluctantly agreed to keep her. But keeping her wasn't the same as caring for her. Her aunt barely acknowledged her existence, and Amara learned early on that silence could hurt more than words. Every day after college and her shift at the bakery, Amara would take the longer route home through the older part of the neighborhood, a part most people ignored. That's where she first saw him. An old man with hollow eyes, always sitting near his window in a cracked chair, staring blankly at the street like he was waiting for someone who would never come. No one talked to him. The neighbors called him Mr. Youssef, but beyond that, no one really knew anything. They said he had lost his wife and son in a fire and hadn't spoken since. Some thought he was strange, others pitied him, but no one reached out. Except Amara. One rainy evening, as she carried a fresh loaf of unsold bread wrapped in a paper bag, she paused in front of his porch. Something in his eyes reflected her own loneliness. Without thinking much, she placed the loaf gently on his doorstep and walked away. The next day, the bread was gone. Encouraged by this silent exchange, she continued doing it, day after day, always leaving bread, sometimes an apple, or a small piece of cheese she saved up for. He never opened the door while she was there, never said a word, but every morning, the food would be gone. It became their quiet routine. For Amara, it was more than just kindness, it was connection. It was something to look forward to. It gave her life meaning when everything else felt dull and gray. 3 months passed, and one afternoon, something changed. She stood by his door, bread in hand, and for the first time, she knocked. A long pause followed. She was about to turn away when the door creaked open. Slowly, the old man appeared, frail, thin, his eyes glassy with something between shock and gratitude. He didn't speak. But he looked at her. Really looked. Then gave her a small, trembling nod before stepping back inside. That nod was everything. From then on, she would knock, and he would open. They wouldn't talk. Instead, they sat together on his porch steps, sharing quiet time. Sometimes she'd bring tea in plastic cups, and they'd sip silently as the sun dipped behind the trees. Amara never asked him about his past. She respected the silence, the mutual understanding that pain didn't always need to be spoken aloud. He never smiled, but sometimes she caught a softness in his expression, a warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The porch visits became her safe place, a tiny patch of peace in a chaotic world. While the world rushed around them, two broken souls sat together in stillness, and that made everything feel okay. Amara didn't realize how much he meant to her, how deeply she had grown to care for this silent companion, until the day came when the door didn't open. It was a cool, overcast morning when Amara approached the house with a soft roll of fresh bread in one hand and a small packet of honey in the other, something she had treated herself to just for him using the last of her pocket money. Her steps were lighter than usual, heart warm with anticipation of their usual quiet company. She knocked on the door gently and waited. Nothing. She knocked again, a little louder this time. Still no response. A frown crept across her face, but she convinced herself he might just be asleep or feeling unwell. She placed the bread and honey carefully by the doorstep and whispered a soft, "See you tomorrow," before leaving, though a strange unease followed her the whole way home. The next day, she returned, same time, same path, and was met with the same silence. The bread and honey were untouched, right where she had left them. Now her chest tightened. Something felt wrong, really wrong. She asked a neighbor if they had seen him. No one had. Another day passed, then two. On the third day, unable to bear the anxiety and fear swelling in her chest, she called for help. It took hours of pleading, convincing people that something was truly wrong before a few neighbors and a local officer finally agreed to check inside. The front door was pushed open slowly, and the house smelled faintly of dust and quiet. Amara's heart pounded so hard she could hardly hear the officer's words. Mr. Youssef was found inside, sitting in his chair by the window, his eyes closed as if he had fallen asleep mid-thought. He had passed away peacefully in the night, likely on the very evening she had brought him the honey roll. Tears slipped from Amara's eyes as she stood frozen in the doorway. The silence now screamed. The man who had once shared that silence with her was gone. She walked through the tiny home, stunned by its emptiness. But then, one of the officers called her over. "You need to see this," he said, holding out a box filled with old napkins, scraps of paper, and torn notebook pages. On each piece, in trembling handwriting, were short, simple notes. "Bread girl came again today. It was warm. So is her heart. She sat with me today. We didn't speak, but I felt alive again. I smiled today. She didn't see, but I did. She reminds me of my son. I wish I had told her." Amara's knees gave out. She dropped to the floor, clutching the notes, sobbing into her hands. Every loaf of bread, every minute of silence, every quiet moment they had shared, he had felt it. Remembered it. Cared. And in his own way, he had loved her too. That day changed everything. In the weeks that followed, Amara started volunteering at a local elderly shelter, bringing food, smiles, and presents to those who had been forgotten by time. She didn't need words to connect. She had learned that love and kindness often live in silence. Every time she handed someone a meal, every time she sat beside someone in stillness, she remembered Mr. Youssef, the old man who never spoke but said everything. He was gone, but his quiet legacy lived through every act of kindness she gave the world. And she never stopped knocking. Some friendships are built not on words, but on presence. And sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness leave behind the deepest memories. Broken heart, if this story touched your heart, please like the video and subscribe to Outfit Stories, where forgotten voices are finally heard, one story at a time.